Very good. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to be talking about the interview. I wanted to start by asking any of you if you have any war stories, either good or bad, from any interviews that you've been involved in. Anything that went on that either makes you laugh or cry. Anything to share? I have a lot, and I'll put them in the slides, but does anyone else have something to share about your interviews? Wow, okay. That's interesting. I find that curious because I've run into a lot of things where it's sort of like, what, they said that, or those sorts of things. So we'll share that as we go along. So we're going to talk about the interview. And you've heard this old proverb from long, long ago, but it's really true. When it comes to the interview, you walk in the door, that is your very first and only opportunity to wow somebody or to repel them. You know, you show up with a wizard's cap on or something, they're going to always remember you as the guy who came to the interview with a wizard's cap on. 20 years later, they're still going to be talking about your wizard's cap. So just be aware, your interview is how you make an impression on the people that you're interviewing with. And why is this something that, let me give you a little bit of credentials that I can help with. I've been a supervisor and a hiring manager since the early 1990s. I've been a program manager since the year 2000. And that means that I have teams of people that I've hired. And that's another thing. People say, have you ever been a CISO? No, but I've hired CISOs. Have you ever been an ISSO? No, but I've hired ISSOs. You know, those sorts of things, because I got to the program manager level and then hired people underneath me. So the interviews that I've conducted, I've done thousands of interviews and reviewed thousands of resumes, tens of thousands of resumes. So I'm trying to bring some of that experience back to you so that you can then use it to move forward and don't encounter the same challenges that previous people did with me. So that's why I'm here. So we all know this. You have two things mainly that a prospective employer is going to use when they decide to hire you or not. And number one is your resume. Number two is the interview. And when they look at your resume and they decide to schedule a face-to-face interview, there was enough in that resume to interest them, okay? They don't interview people that are not being considered for the position. So every interview is good. Every interview is a positive step. It's in the right direction. You're headed towards that hiring, all right? And you have to remember that there are both of these things take place. The resume can be an absolute killer resume, but if you bomb the interview, they may still not take the resume and say, well, the resume is good enough, even though the person, you know, can't string two sentences together or was constantly picking their nose or whatever. And they decide not to hire you, even though your resume was great. So they both have to be good, your resume and your interview. Okay, so try and remember, you're going to be, thank you, Parima, you're going to be impressing people through both of these, and they both have to be good. Okay, so everything in your interview is within your control. You're not just going there to answer questions. You are the commodity that's being examined. So it's all within your control to maximize what you're trying to project to your interviewer. Okay? And this is something that a lot of people don't think about. There have been many, many studies and actual court cases. People have sued people saying, well, they didn't hire me because I've got a tattoo on my face, or whatever. And the truth of the matter is, your resume is objective. Your interview is subjective. They're looking at you, the person. All right? You've got all of these skills. You've got all of these activities. You've got all of these art forms that you bring with you. What they're looking at in the interview is how well do you work with them, and they also consider, are you a good fit for their team? Now, I point out here, be careful in your interview about just restating what's in your resume. They should have, and I say probably, they probably read your resume because that's what made them decide to bring you in. But they may have missed things in your resume. So be aware, listen for those sorts of things, for something that you thought was really good and they didn't even mention. Well, maybe that's what you bring up toward the end of the interview. I want to remind you that I did this as well, or something like that. But don't think that every person has read every line of every resume when they bring somebody into an interview. You've heard me say this over and over. Chris and I researched this. What is the amount of time that a prospective employer, even HR, spends on an interview on average? Anyone want to take a guess? How long am I going to spend on, let's say this is a resume. I have a resume here. How long am I going to spend on it before I go to the next one or decide that you're good and possibly worth a second look?
I'm going to say less than a minute.
Less than a minute. I heard the word seconds. Who said?
I said 15 seconds.
15 seconds? Anyone else?
Elevator pitch.
Yep, yeah, sure. 30 seconds. That's, just so you know, elevator pitch, the industry standard for an elevator pitch is 30 seconds. So under a minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds. Anyone else want to guess? Because you're all wrong.
10 seconds?
I remember you mentioning 7 seconds.
7 seconds.
Oh my.
Right. So here you are, and you've got this big monster three-page resume. Oh, I did this, and I was here, and they're not going to get to page 3. They are not going to get, probably not going to get to page 2. So you got to have all your power right up front and at the top, okay, on your resume. So when you go into your interview, there may be nuggets hidden down further in your resume that they may not have seen. And that's something that you can bring up and say, hey, I did this too. Oh, really? Just something to think about. So, okay. The interview is a combination of sensory inputs. What I mean by that, I'll share a little bit later, but you control all of that. How you look, how you smell, how you sound, how you conduct yourself, all of those are what they're looking at. They're not just saying, how good are you with, COBOL or whatever, okay? So if you have a notable characteristic, let's say you've got a birthmark that you're always concerned about or whatever, don't worry about it during the interview. They're not going to hire you or fire you because you have a birthmark. What they're looking at is how well do you with that feature. If you're shorter than everybody in the room, that does not make that a disadvantage. If you have to, duck your head to get in the door because you're so tall, that is not an advantage. They want to know how well you operate with the equipment you've been given. Okay? So the thing to ask yourself is, are you comfortable with you? And that's a way to think about it. For many years, I've been concerned that my left eye doesn't open as much as my right eye, because back in 2012 I had pneumonia and I ended up with this eye that doesn't open all the way up. Okay, but does that make a difference in how I do my stuff, or am I always trying to make you only see my good side or whatever? So how well do you operate with what you've got? That's what they're looking at. They're not looking to say, I want somebody who doesn't have a birthmark. That's not what they're looking for. It's how well you operate with what you've got. Make sense? All right. Your appearance. Dress like a professional. I've seen people come into interviews in jacket and tie. I've seen people come in T-shirts. And I probably don't have to tell you, my thoughts lean toward a positive reaction when somebody dresses like they look like they want the job. And that's a way to think about it. Okay? If you're in a VTC, remember, your background, the sounds around you or whatever, make sure you have, a noise blanking microphone or whatever, so that they're just focusing on you. Okay? Make sure, like it says here, test everything in advance. Don't be showing up at your interview saying, oh, how do I turn on the video? That's not the time to be doing it. You all know how to use Zoom, because it has nearly identical controls to this. So if somebody asks you to use some strange video teleconference app, immediately learn how to use it. Then go to your interview. Okay? And like I say at the bottom, you want to look like you're the best choice. Remember, there are 10 other people behind you waiting to come in and impress the interviewers. So you want to look like the best choice. Okay? Big negative here. I have been in interviews and people's phones have gone off. It's rude, and it shows that you didn't consider whether or not you were going to have an issue. It doesn't matter if your kid fell down in nursery school. You can put your phone on silent, but make sure your ringer is off. Okay? Cardinal rule here: never let your phone ring during an interview. Check it before you walk into the building. Okay? All right. You're going to be selling yourself. And again, you're trying to confirm to them that you're the best fit for the job. Maybe not skills-wise. And I'll explain some of that as we go along. Everything that is going on in this interview is considered. See the list. Not only what you're saying, but the manner in which you say it. Do you say it like you're trying to remember something that you've memorized? Or do you speak with experience? Do you speak with confidence? Do you speak with comfort in yourself? Sure, you're going to be nervous during an interview. Everybody's nervous. But how do you handle yourself while you're nervous? One of the best ways to do that, to help manage your nervousness, is to literally conduct your interview with yourself in a mirror before you get there. Practice every response. And there are going to be some things that you can almost always guarantee are going to be in your interview. Does anybody have any Um, what is a question that you can be pretty sure is going to be asked to you during your interview? Anyone?
Tell me something about yourself that's not on your resume, or briefly summarize your resume.
Yep.
And then my personal favorite one, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses?
Yep. Anyone else?
I've got a lot of, why should we hire you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That is the one that, remember, I think Parimi, you yelled elevator pitch. That is your response when they say, why should we hire you? That's your elevator pitch. That's your 30 seconds of fame, where you become your own best cheerleader. In other words, if you practice it enough, you're not whining and complaining, oh, I hope you give me the job. No, this is where you can say, this is why I'm the best. And practice it. Practice, practice, practice.
You
and
have
we'll
to
get
believe it yourself.
That's right. That's right. And you've seen me do this in a lot of my slide decks. I say, would you hire you? So, yeah. And also, your enthusiasm, your nervousness, when they ask you, why should we hire you? That should be the point where you bring the excitement level up. You are not responding to a question. You are literally giving your commercial about why you're the best choice. Okay? You bring that excitement level up. They say, anything else, anything else we need to know about you? Why should we hire you? Yeah, here we go, and just take off. That's the enthusiasm and the excitement that shows them that you're comfortable in your own skin. Because everybody else behind you is going to be like, well, and I'm going to talk about this one when we get to it. Oh, I'm a people person. I'm a team player. That's not what they're looking for. The only person that can determine if you're a team player is the team. So be careful about using some of those old phrases, because some of them are sort of like, right. And I mentioned this before, everyone in their resumes, everyone thinks they're good at communications. But you have to show examples of how you're good at communications. You can't just say, I'm an excellent communicator. I'm strong in communication skills. You got to demonstrate it. So it's the same thing when you're in your interview. Demonstrate it. Okay? So ask yourself, as you're getting ready to sell yourself, why do you think you're qualified? And then, of course, you have to practice so that you will be able to tell them without stumbling, without saying, why else should you hire me? Let's see. No, you should have already gone through all of that, have it queued up in your mind, and just be prepared for them to pull the trigger and off you go. Okay? Very, very good to remember that. And Brenda, that is probably the question that seals the deal or sinks the ship more than any other question that I can remember in an interview. Why should we hire you? Okay, so practice it. Be the boss answering that particular question. Okay, here's one. I mentioned this in LinkedIn. You have to know what you're getting into. And in order to do that, you have to have studied the job vacancy announcement and the company that's offering the position. If this company is rotten to the core and has made all the headlines for all the wrong reasons, and you're looking at them for a job vacancy, maybe you don't want to be answering how you fit in, but they're going to ask you anyway. They're trying to figure out, are you going to be a good fit? But you need to know what they're thinking. And they're thinking about, how big we are, how big our clients are, what our most important role is, whether we have patents, intellectual property, whether we've suffered from cyber attacks recently. All those sorts of things are going to come into play, and you can learn all of that from the industry, if you will, by doing searches on them before you arrive. You want to be knowledgeable of them, just like through your resume, they're knowledgeable of you. Okay? That shows that you have taken the time to exercise due diligence to learn about them. Not just, here I am, here's my stuff, hire me. Here I am, here's my stuff, hire me. And they hear that hundreds of times. They want to know somebody that has already figured out why I'm going to be good for your team. Okay? So be thinking about that. Get ahead of their objections. There are going to be things that you know about that you have gaps like in your resume. Maybe you don't have as much experience as they're asking for. Okay? Be prepared to respond to what you know could be weak spots in your resume or your experience. And that's where you can talk about secondary skills like communication, like teamwork, like project management, etc. So practice those, bringing out those secondary skills, not just cybersecurity, but me, the person, and where I'm strong as well. Okay? You have to remember that what you're saying and how you say it is what they're listening to. Don't try and force it. Be careful about trying to remember everything. You want to be practiced enough so that it is not something you are, they can tell you read it off a sheet of paper and memorized it. Try and make sure that you practice it to where your comfort level increases and your nervousness decreases before you get there. Okay? Secondary skills, here's a tip. Some soft skills and activities that you have or find in your resume or can demonstrate could be very helpful, but only if they're relevant. So you've got to be able to listen to what they're doing or have read this in the information about the company before you get there so that you can help bring some of those things out because you can tell they're probably relevant. But you have to be thinking about that. And I've got a horror story about that to share with you when we get to that slide. Here's another tip. Always carry a pen and paper. And what I mean by a paper is a pad of paper, a portfolio looking thing that you write in and close it up and it stays safe. Not, oh, okay, well, you turn one of your own resumes over and start scribbling on the back. You got a pen, no, don't do that. Be prepared, have a writing instrument, and I will tell you, this is just me. If you happen to be wearing a jacket or have something with a pocket in it, it looks helpful to be able to reach in and pull out a pen because you knew it was there. Okay? You can hit me up anytime, anywhere, in any situation, whether it's church, whether it's a civic activity, or whatever. If I'm wearing a coat, I've got a pen right here on my inside pocket. Hit me up next time you see me. But that's what I do. And, you won't see it, but you practice. I know I may have to write something, so I always carry a pen. I'm left-handed. It's in my right in coat pocket. Always. All of my coats have pens. So just something that you can do so that when, they say, oh, well, call this number to find out, you're ready to go. You have something to write on, and it's permanent. In other words, it's going to close and retain the information, and you have a writing instrument that you're practiced at. You're not, oh, let's see, where did I put, no, practice it. I heard somebody unmute. Did you want to share something there? Okay.
I thought it was funny. In my brief period of termination recently, I was preparing for interviews. I actually went out to the dollar store and bought one of those portfolio pads that look like a clipboard.
Yep.
So I could put my resume in it, pens in it, and look prepared for interviews. So I was like,
yep.
I left my clipboard in Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's part of it as well.
Yep, but I actually went out and bought a little portfolio specifically for that purpose.
Excellent.
Because, ladies, we don't always wear the jacket. So I figured carrying this around looks very professional.
Mm-hmm. And if you get a portfolio that has a pen holder in it, use it. Yep, exactly right. And hopefully I don't have to say this, but make sure the pen works before you get in. It's not a brand new pen where you've got to sit and do this to get it started. Okay, you're practiced at it. Okay, next one, control your fashion statements. Let me just say, manage your fashion statements. I've arrived at interviews where somebody put on so much cologne, by the time they left, we all had to step out of the room to catch our breath. Person didn't get hired. Okay? So be aware it's all within your control. I've also seen people whose fingers, look like this knife here. How in the world, you don't want me trying to figure out how you're going to type because you have 2-inch nails on. You don't want me thinking that. Maybe it's the time to bring it down. When you're at work, okay, but when you are at an interview, the things that catch somebody's attention may not be good things. I'll just say it that way. Okay? Anyone else? Any thoughts or ideas before I go on?
I'd like, don't let your own details distract from yourself.
Right. Right. Okay. The resume, always carry a couple extra copies because somebody may get pulled into the interview that hasn't read it yet. And oh, by the way, never switch your resume. In other words, you send them a resume and then you've refreshed it and made it new. The interview is not the time to do a bait and switch. Make sure that the resume you submitted is the resume that you're carrying. Okay? Just something, you don't want to say, oh, here's a new resume with new information. They already read your resume and they brought you in based on that other one. So if there's something that's missing in the older resume, that's the time for you to bring it out, not to hand them a new resume. Okay? All right. Do your homework on them. Because, Chris, you nailed it. Do you have any questions for us? Make sure that those questions are educated questions. Okay? I'm going to talk a little bit about horror stories, but ask questions so that they know you're interested in them as well as them being interested in you. Don't whine. Don't gripe. Well, I noticed that you left your last job after only 4 months. Can you explain that? Well, yeah, my supervisor's wife didn't like the fact that I always brought in cranberry bread to work, and the supervisor's allergic to cranberries. And no, don't whine. There are ways that you can speak and say things without whining. The whole world's against me. I can't keep a job. They don't want to hear that. So be careful about being positive in everything, and don't complain about your coworkers or your boss or your company. Because guess what? You're going into a new place that has coworkers and a boss and a company. Think about it. Oh, I hated my boss. Well, what are you going to think about me? You don't want to have that conversation occurring in the interviewer's head. If you, like it says here, if you can't say anything good, don't say anything. All right, here are some of my actual quotes. I wanted to go through these. I thought you'd have fun with those. Somebody for an IT job came in and said, I am a certified lash technician. Now, everything else aside, what occurred is the interviewer said, why do you think it's important to be a certified lab technician? He had misheard what she had said, and so now she had to explain it. Oh, no, it's lash technician from a beautician's school, and this was for an IT job. I'm a certified lash technician. Maybe not such a benefit in the interview.
I probably would turn that around, Scotty, and say,
Yep.
I have very good attention to detail on my lashes. Look, isn't my lashes very pretty?
Yeah. There are things that will fit, and there are things that you should thoroughly examine before you decide to speak about them. I'll just say that. The next one, I always hear that. I won't say always. This is one of the most frequent responses I hear from people in an interview, and none of it can be proven. It's words. I'm a hard worker. Okay, well, I'm not going to hire people who aren't hard workers. I'm a people person. Only the people around you can help you determine that. And again, either your resume or your interview, how you conduct yourself in the interview, will help somebody decide if you're a people person or not. So be careful about using those terms because they can't be proven. This is my big war story about I don't just hire skills. When I was in the Pentagon, had a guy, he was an actual award-winning systems engineer in my company. And my vice president said, you should hire this guy. And I came and interviewed him, and he looked wonderful. His skills on paper were beyond comparison. However, when I spoke to him, it leaked out that he said that the customers can be frustrating. Now, why would I want to hire somebody who gets frustrated and then accidentally says something to a customer and I have to go apologize for what my employee said to them? So just something to think about. This guy did not get hired. I went back to my VP and I said, nope. He said, what? I said, I'm not going to hire him. He said, why not? I said, because he said the customers can be frustrating. Oh. Literally the response from my vice president. Oh. So, okay. Here was another good one. During the interview, any questions that you have for me? This person answered and said, yes, do you have SLAs here? Can I get a copy of them? Because when I arrive, I want to hit the ground running and knock your socks off. What? From an interviewee asking, can I get a copy of your SLAs because I want to impress you? Parima, you remember Grace?
Yes. That was her?
That was her.
She was awesome.
She was awesome. Yes, she was.
That really is an awesome interview response, too.
Yes. Yes. So Yeah, just so you know, that literally I made my decision to hire her right after that sentence came out.
Great decision.
Yep. And oh, by the way, she became a master in the SLAs. So, yep. And by the way, we hired her at a low-level position. Then she became a higher-level position. Then she became the support manager, all within a year or two from the time she arrived. In other words, she just slammed her way through the ladder because she was so good.
Yay.
And that question, that sentence, set her apart from every other interviewee. So something to think about. I had this other one where I was looking at people, and this was somebody coming in at an entry level, and they had ITIL certification, ITIL, typically reserved for people at higher levels. And I said, "You have ITIL?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Do you like ITIL?" Because most people don't understand it. I said, "Do you like ITIL?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Why?" She thought about it a second. She said, "It tells me what I don't do." In other words, it helps me understand that there are certain things that fit within my role, and there are other things that don't fit in my role. That's a wonderful perspective, especially during an interview. And yes, I hired her. This next one, I don't recommend anybody do it unless you're trying to nail the interview. I did it. And yes, it was a risk. But the person I spoke to was in the military, in the Pentagon, and if you know anything about the U.S. military, they require their military members to relocate. You can't go to the same place and stay there for 20 years. You must take assignments. And so I knew this guy, however long he had been there, was already thinking about his departure. Already. And so I said, "I see myself in your position in 5 years." And that was no risk to him. That was literally helpful to him to conceive that there could be somebody right behind me to take my job when I leave. Okay? So you got to do that one very carefully. I also have had where you said, is there anything else you want to know about us or whatever, anything we should know about you? Yeah, I don't work Saturdays. That's not the time. That is not the time to bring that up. You can say that to HR after you get hired, but don't do it in your interview before you're hired. No, well, what happens if, once a year we've got to do something on a Saturday and it's mission critical, all hands on deck, the bloomin' president is there doing it, but you're like, "Nope, I'm not going to do it." Don't bring it up in the interview. Let them hire you, and then you negotiate that. Okay? And the last one was from my very first job interview, because I had hair down to my shoulders. They could ask, weird things. Just be prepared for it. When Steve Rastelli asked me this, I was 16 years old. He said, "Scott, would you cut your hair for this job?" I said, "Steve, I would straight razor my head for this job." He said, "I'll see you here tomorrow with a haircut." So you can do it. You can manage yourself and avoid some of these pitfalls. So right now, while we're going through this, learn to ask questions before you get into those interviews. Ask Chris, ask me, ask Nerman, anybody who's been through the interview process a time or two, or like me, 1,000 times. I can provide some insight. Always bring your resumes to us before you submit them. Let us provide some feedback that may help improve your resumes. Talk to us. We may help you improve your interviews. Okay? But if you don't ask, you won't get it. All right? Any other questions? What do you think? Was this fun?
This was great. Great refresher. I think I do remember.
Yes.
Good. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's always fun to bring this up because, again, the main reason I mentor is I want people to be better than I was. Avoid my pitfalls. Avoid the things that drove me to, in the wrong direction. I'll never do that again. Well, it's like, remember when you were a kid and you'd reach up for something, a pot on the stove, and your mom would say, "Don't touch that, it's hot." That's my job, to try and say things like, "Don't say that in an interview, it's hot," or whatever, okay? So that's why I love mentoring, because I want everyone to do better than I have, and I've been awfully successful. Okay? All right, thanks everybody. I appreciate your time. We are right at the end of our time here, so have a wonderful afternoon and weekend.
Thank you.